welcome to the Plenty of Positivity podcast. I am your host, Courtney Beck, and today we have an amazing guest, Michelle Wilson. She is my friend, but she also is so much more, and you're going to get to know her in this podcast. So welcome, Michelle.
Thanks, Courtney. It's nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you so much for being Yes, thank you so much for being on this podcast. And typically, the components of the podcast are life. They surround life, sport, and career. And so we like to begin with just a little bit of a background about our guests. So if you don't mind just sharing your background, maybe where you're from.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I grew up in South Georgia, as you can probably tell, in Bainbridge, between Bainbridge and Wiggum, which is two small towns in South Georgia. And grew up coming to Tallahassee. I still live here today. I went to Valdosta State to college, where I met my husband, and we married shortly after college. Lived in Savannah for a while, and I started working there at Hospital's Wellness Center. My background is, we may get into this more, but my background is in exercise science. And so I worked at a Hospital's Wellness Center, and then we moved to Thomasville, Georgia, where I really feel like I started my career. But I've been married to my husband for 19 years and, been in and around the area where we are now for a long time.
That is fantastic, Michelle. And if you could take us back, as you were growing up, parents play such a large role in our lives, that positive influence, kind of that voice in the back of our mind sometimes when we just need that extra dose of encouragement, if you will. So was there ever a time when you remember specifically, maybe mom or dad said something to you that even to this day you remember?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up, my dad was a fifth generation farmer, he had a small farm. And so I grew up on that farm with my dad working, and also his dad working, and also my great grandfather working for a lot of my younger years. So I got to see that, and we really had a family approach to the farm, very much like idyllic whenever you think about, you read in books, or I can very much associate with that. So, but it was always connected with hard work and like resiliency and the inability to not quit until the job is done. And when I think about that, it's just it feels like it's the crux of what makes me who I am. So I don't know that anything was ever specifically said. Well, there was a lot of things that were said, but it wasn't any one thing. It was just the way that I grew up with an attitude of persistence and tenacity.
That is fantastic. I love when you talk about hard work, tenacity, because I feel that could resonate with so many people and so many different careers later on in life, but how the impact of one's childhood, the family members within it, how that can really shape your life. And like I said, into your career, into other aspects of your life too, and how you as a person, how you approach work, how you approach maybe into like relationships, understanding commitment, understanding the ups and the downs too. So that is fantastic. It really seems like your family played such an incredible role as you were young, and then up to now as you're blossoming into this wonderful career that you have. Every time I speak to you, Michelle, I have to tell the audience this. You have, and I'm sure they've already seen it, such a magnetic personality. Every time I'm with you, I feel like I come alive. And I think that's I'm serious. It's such a special thing because that's so unique to have that magnetic personality. And so I'm wondering, what is maybe your life motto? Maybe what is that motto that you maybe live by, or that perspective and lens that you see life through?
Wow, that's a great question. So, it really is it's hard to grasp and it's hard to convey. I think because I appreciate your kind words so much. That's means so much to me, and I feel the same way about you. But whenever I think about the way, I'm always an encourager. I love to encourage people, and I think that's just a part of my giftedness. Um, Again, back to my father, I think that was instilled. It's because of the way he encouraged me. I joke with people all the time. My dad's passed away, which, well, I keep speaking in past tense, but I used to joke, like, I would say to people, I can be walking in a straight line and my dad would tell me he's proud of me, which was funny, but it shows how that has created in me a confidence, number one, an ability to try things that I may not be good at right off the bat. And I think maybe to what you're speaking of, the ability to see an outlook on life of, you know, we're not perfect. We're just human. No human is perfect. And so we've got to just keep going and learn from our mistakes. I think I was actually just telling my 16-year-old niece that graduated this past Saturday from high school a year early. I was just telling her about the importance of acknowledging whenever you make a mistake. And that is where I can see, if I look back over my life so far, my maturity, the biggest part of my maturity has come from whenever I own where I do wrong, because not only does it create a space for you to make something right where it could have been an error or that's not that big of a deal, or it could have been something that is a really big deal. But the biggest thing is that it helps me with myself to say, oh, I'm just human and I get things wrong sometimes. And that's okay. We learn and we move on.
I love that. What you were talking about, how we're not perfect. We want to be, right? Like in multiple aspects of our life. But being able to recognize when you do make a mistake,
Right.
what lessons can you learn from that, whatever experience that was, but then how you move forward even stronger and having a more, I would say even healthier perspective, right?
Right.
How we approach people, how we approach life in general. So that is wonderful. And it's so true. Like I feel so many lessons that we learn in our childhood from our parents, overcoming challenges. And that was one thing I wanted to move into, was challenges maybe that you've experienced in life. Was there any one maybe specific challenge, just generally speaking, it could be in any aspect of your life, where as you were going through it, you were realizing how much you were also growing through it too as well, but it made an impact on your life and maybe where you are today and your positive outlook on life present day?
Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't know this top podcast was going to be about my father, but so because I wanted to bring it back. So I'm 43
Yeah.
and my dad passed away when I was 31, which is very young. I mean, he was only 56. He had a 2-year bout with esophageal cancer, and yeah, he passed away almost 12 years ago. And being 31 and realizing, my dad was 25 whenever I was born. The reality for me, I was already launching myself into a career. I was successful and really like ramping up, running all over the place, loved the busyness and the excitement of, been in sales a long time, and I was in sales then, just like going next best thing, one step after the other. There's no end to the stairs, if you will. And when I realized, I stepped back in the grief and I said, in 25 years, this sounds morbid. In 25 years, this could be me. Like this, what I mean by that is like, it was the mortality or the life that we live and the life that I wanted to live. And I was like, I gotta chill out. And it really has shaped me. It's helped me to look at opportunities or look at jobs that I've worked in, and it's helped give me courage to fight for something that is a good fit for not only my career, but also for my life and what I want my life to be. So I would say that that was really pivotal.
Absolutely. Well, first off, Michelle, I'm so sorry to hear that about your father. But the way your perspective on life, um, and understanding how loss in one's life could also translate to something positive. I experienced the same thing. My mother passed away at a very young age, and it was devastating,
Yeah.
right? It turns your whole world upside down. You take a step back, and especially when you're young, you can't quite comprehend everything that's happening at that
Right.
moment and how your life will change moving forward.
Right.
But to be able to find hope in it. And for me, one of my coping mechanisms, if you will, was just to understand that she was in a better place
Yeah.
and that she was not suffering
Yeah.
anymore. And
Right.
that perhaps maybe she was looking over or down on
Yeah.
me, if you will,
Yeah.
now in a much better place.
Right.
But when you talk about loss and you talk about finding the courage now in your career, to not be afraid to try new things. And
Right.
I think especially our younger audience, to understand that, as we all know, like you can't take life for granted, right? Tomorrow is not promised.
No,
But
absolutely.
to go after those dreams,
Yeah.
and you really are a shining light, Michelle, for so many people. I seriously remember the very first time that I met you. I had such a connection. You're very easy to speak with. You're so uplifting. And I think that is something that's so encouraging that our listeners could also take away today, is that you could
Mhm.
find a positive light, a silver lining, and something that could be also, unfortunately, tragic in your life
Right.
that occurs. So thank you so much for sharing that story,
Yeah,
Michelle. It's really going to help
absolutely.
a lot of people.
Good. Oh, that makes me
Thank
happy.
you. Absolutely. So I want to transition over into another side of your life, I guess, if you will, another stage. Um, going Entering into college and college in general. College can play such a profound impact on our lives. We're meeting so many different people at that point, right? Whether it's professors, we're developing new friendships, maybe joining certain interest groups or clubs,
Yeah.
academic clubs. So if you wouldn't mind speaking to your college experience and how, if you could look back and provide maybe an example of like a positive impact that your college career had on you.
Yeah, for sure. So, another relevant to my upbringing and like the transition.
Sure.
So, I'm a first generation college graduate. And I said my dad, he farmed like from like even in middle school. So, he was always working on the farm during the summers and same as me. And so there wasn't a lot of guidance, but there was always like an encouragement to education and to become educated. And so um, I found myself at Valdosta State University, which I'm very thankful for my education. But I hope that this will translate to your younger listeners as well. Um, I started off at my like local community college, and I was just didn't know my way. I mean, I was an honor graduate from high school, but so meaning I should have been on a curriculum like a track to higher education, and I was, but it was like I had no direction. And so after the
Sure.
freshman year, my one of my close friends, she said, "Hey, we're down a roommate. Will you? Why don't you come over here?" And I literally, I mean, I had great grades. I did not have great SAT scores, so I'll say that. But I was like, I'll apply if I get in. I'm a transfer student, Michelle. I had no awareness that I was gonna get in. Like I'm just trying to convey like the naivety. Like that's what it was. It was just I was completely naive of like what even happened. So and I didn't have that guidance from my family. So obviously I got in, and that I stayed there for 4 years. And it's just really it's really funny when I think about that, because now I am so much more knowledgeable about the process. And so but when it comes to that, I was around girls and young ladies that I had grown up with, and I lived with them, and we're still friends to this day, which I'm so thankful for. What's really cool though is that meeting other people and experiencing, even at a small college like that, seeing other
Yeah.
people and the way that other, like the diversity, if you will, of people
Sure.
coming from different areas, and even if it was just across the state of Georgia, there was like obviously national and international students, but it just was still a good and a great place for me to be. Looking back, I wish I had gone to a larger school, but I'm also know that it was the right place for me at the right time. And yeah, it was. I fumbled through, I guess I'll say, until I got into my major. And I my background is in exercise science, and I it was a small cohort, and we grew to be very close. I was friends with people that I studied with, and one of those happened to be my now husband. So we met and studied together with some other people, and yeah, that's where. So that's like a very roundabout answer to your question, but yeah, I hope it's relevant to something.
Absolutely. And a couple things that I drew from that was how valuable college could be. We obviously think we're there at college within our specific area to learn something that's unique to that area of study, if you will, right? But in the realm of things, we get to open our eyes, just like you were saying, to different cultures, different backgrounds of people, to have a new perspective on life and to have um and sometimes it could be a refreshing perspective, right?
Right.
I think that's so important today to be able to see different perspectives, and this is even in life in general. But to understand how maybe somebody's upbringing could influence them or impact their lives in a way, and to be able at the end of the day to come together and to recognize our differences, but that the uniqueness is going to take us so much farther in life. We
Right.
need everybody's uniqueness coming together. And so I loved that. I loved the friendship. I love different backgrounds. The friendship I wanted to just comment on how I just think that's so exciting to know
It's so cool.
somebody from college to present day who's seen you grow throughout the years. I think is spectacular, and it's such a blessing. It really
It really
is
is.
to have that friendship. Do you mind speaking a little bit more on
Not at
that?
all. I would love it.
People,
People,
so
so we still, so again, I grew up in a small town in South Georgia. I've known there's a group of four of us, and I've known these three women since middle school. And we were friends throughout. It's so special, and people comment for the longest time, like into our 20s, we would like meet regularly, go to a beach weekend once a year, do stuff together. And maybe it's like as the four of us, but then the two by two or three, and three would be getting together, and people would say this is really special, and we didn't really grasp it. And now
yeah.
we go, oh wow, we've been friends for a really long time, and to be walk with each other through life is really just very special. So yeah, I can't, they, one lives in Thomasville, one lives in outside of Savannah, and one lives in outside of Atlanta. And it's just really special to have that, and to be able to know. So I'll say this too about this group of friends. Friendships kind of change, and adult friendships are so hard from the aspect of making new friends, but also life change and people are transient. But no matter where I am in life, the ability to go and call one of them and to even just process something from like my childhood or process something from my adulthood, they know they were there the whole time. And it's really special. It's really special.
That is so exciting. It just like it reminds me of friends that I have from childhood, from high school, and even coaches from childhood. I recently took a trip back down to Orlando, and I was able to see actually many coaches. And um, it's so interesting, just like you said, how you could still, when you're in their presence, if it's on the phone or literally in person, how you could just jump back into the conversation like it was yesterday. And for me, like those are the people that you just know there's like something special there to carry on a friendship for that long, and for them to know you when, for example, in my case, like when I was like 8 years old, practically, to seeing you now as like a grown adult, I really do. I think that's so special, and it can have such a profound and positive impact on your life present day too as
Mhm.
well. So thank you for sharing that, Michelle, just your whole college
Absolutely.
experience. As you would move forward from college, you're about to get, say, your first job. And if you could walk us through that, the emotions, were you nervous? Were you just, hey, I'm excited. I'm ready for that first interview. If you don't mind sharing that with us.
Listen, if I am nothing, and I don't, I say this humbly, my confidence, I don't know. I'm just like, yeah, of course I can do it.
I love
Which
it.
sometimes foolishly, to be honest, sometimes just completely foolishly. I'm like, why
I love
wouldn't
it.
you want to work at me? So I'll say I did read a book. I remember, so I worked transitioning. My last semester of school, it was during the summer. I did an internship in cardiac rehab. Uh, like two of those, it's like a 12-week internship, and so two of those weeks was at the hospital's wellness center that I ended up working at as my first job. And they did have opportunities at cardiac rehab. I didn't really want to work from like that, the hospital's gym, if you will, perspective, but it was an opportunity. And so I was interested in getting into sales right off the bat. And I interviewed with one pharmaceutical sales company, and they chose not to move forward with me, which, is okay. I didn't have any experience. But um,
Sure.
I, even with the interview for the hospital where I had already had an introduction, I took it seriously. And I will say this, like maybe it's that whole like confidence foolishly, if you will, but I will tell you this, if I'm also prepared and I take things seriously from a preparation standpoint, because the way that I approach really everything is, if I'm going to prepare as best I can, and maybe in all of the knowledge that I prepare for is completely irrelevant, but it helps me to calm myself. It helps me to ground myself and to know what I'm capable of and what I can look forward to. So sometimes the preparation is more about just preparing my, I guess, vibe, if you will, or my ability to stay calm. But I remember taking that, and I read this interview book, and I've used things from that interview book throughout my career. So yeah, that was sort of my approach of like prepare, but also like I got this.
See, I love that. And I think that's so important for our listeners because it depends like what, phase of life you're in, but speaking to those young women who are coming out of college, entering into maybe their first job interview, maybe going out for that first, trying to maintain or trying to get that first internship.
Yeah,
But to be able to have those like tips or words of advice and preparation, like you said, is critical.
right.
Not only as to how you're going to present yourself, how you're going to speak to them about your experience, but something I think is critical in interviewing is to be able to speak about that experience, but how it will translate forward into that job that you're applying for, right? If you have certain skill sets, be really focus on those strengths and don't be
Right.
afraid to talk about them. Talk
Yeah.
about them and how they could help or how you could be an asset to the company. But then in addition, always do your research on whatever entity it is that you're interviewing for. If it's a company, organization, business in general. But I think that's so important because that can set you apart from other applicants too, as well. So I am so happy that you
Yeah.
mentioned that, Michelle.
Yeah.
Preparation. I just love
Yeah.
that.
And in
Absolutely.
regards to that preparation, I'll just follow up with finalization, if you will. A part of that book was to write a handwritten thank you note, to which I have done. Now, some situations in my career have not warranted a handwritten thank you note, but always send an email. I think that I would just add that tidbit. Obviously, emails are appropriate, but if you have the opportunity to write a handwritten thank you note, you it goes a long way. And I'll tell you this really neat story. My first sales job, I this is so funny. My interview was at the airport, at the Tallahassee airport, upstairs where you like kids and families watch people fly and off. And I was like, there's literally kids running around and screaming. And I was like, okay, stay focused. So I have this interview and I had a like prepared a handwritten thank you note ahead of time. And I was like, I'm just going to figure it out. I didn't want to hand it to him right after that, the person that interviewed me. So I found like a security guard and there was an interview right after me. And I said, excuse me, sir. And I asked, and he literally delivered it for me. And the interviewer, he was like, wow. He literally is like, wow, I can't believe you did that. And I was like, kind of goes back to that whole like kind of foolish confidence of you. I'm like, well, of course I'll deliver that. I don't think I don't think anything's awkward. So that's like just part of me. I'm like, that just doesn't really affect me like some people. But I would say push yourself if you feel awkward to do things that they're just kind, obviously they're just, they're just kind.
But that speaks to you and all the positive characteristics and traits that you possess, Michelle, is kindness, is being able to think outside the box, do things that are going to set you apart, in particularly in that interview, because I think that's so important. Is there's competition out there, right? Like, just like you said, there was another person coming in as you were leaving that interview. But how are you as an individual going to set yourself apart? And I've never heard of that. And I absolutely love that. I could just see, like, I don't even know who this is, but I could have just imagined once that letter was given to that individual, like, wow. I mean, I would have been impressed. Like,
Yeah.
that doesn't happen, right? And especially
Yeah.
today, like you mentioned emails. I mean, everybody's obviously, they have their computer, laptops, etc., phones for that matter. And emails, like you said, there's nothing wrong with it. But one thing that really resonated when you were talking was going the extra mile. Going the extra mile, setting yourself apart, taking the time to literally write, of course, a handwritten note, I think is so important because it sets you apart, that you at least were grateful, whether you get the job or you don't. It's
Right.
demonstrating your character too in
Yeah.
life.
Right.
I
Right. Which is
love
all we
that.
have, you know?
Yes, I love that. Um, so as you would move forward in your career, you have a wealth of knowledge, Michelle. I always love picking your brain, different perspectives on management, on sales, on, I know you also have business development expertise too, as well. So would you mind speaking as far as just like words of advice if our listeners wanted to go into the realm? Like I said, it's pretty broad, right?
Mhm.
Sales, business
Yeah.
development. But what is something that you feel present day as far as a skill set that needs to be, or that the individual would need to encompass to really maybe thrive in that area or industry?
I'm currently working with someone who is in the same role that I am, and she's new to sales. And I've done a lot of like sales coaching and mentoring, which I absolutely love doing. And thankfully, she's been felt that it's been helpful. But with that all being said, it's helping me to see the need for, again, persistence. And
Yeah.
let me back up. Anybody can do sales. And I think that's what I'm trying to get at, is that this person, she never thought she'd find herself in sales, but here she is, and she's really doing great, and she's, you know, appreciative of the opportunity. But the thing is that any personality can do sales. I think a lot of times we put this like, oh, she's outgoing or she's bubbly or she's whatever. That doesn't have to be the case. That's what I love about sales coaching, is pulling out of someone what is going to be the way that they connect with the person, because sales is boiled down. Selling to need is important. Offering, like making sure you're selling to the correct person. All of these things can combine together, that as long as you can be afraid, as long as you push through the fear and push outside of your comfort zone on a continuous basis, that is going to only help you to grow. There's there's a wheel, like a picture, graphic, if you will. It's I can't remember all of the plots, if you will, but it's a circle and it's got like, different lines. Basically the circle is a comfort zone. And I used to use that kind of a variation of it and say, I want you to go, like, if this is the line of comfort zone, I want you to go, you don't have to go far outside of comfort zone, just go outside your comfort zone. And then when you become comfortable there, take it one step further. And if you're always pushing yourself, you're going to just continue to grow, and you're going to continue to become a more refined version of the person that you want to become and the employee that you want to become. So,
Shell, it's so exciting and so uplifting when you were just talking right now about a couple things. You were talking about like mentorship, being able to mentor someone, to be able to recognize their potential. And like I said, you have so much wisdom, so much knowledge in your field. And I just know anybody who's working with you or does work with you is beyond like blessed, because you could learn so much from your personality, and to be able to have that, to be able to bring out, like, just like you said, somebody who may be more of an introvert, but
right.
wanting to, they've applied for the job. They either obviously in this case got it, but maybe they're struggling just a little bit. And I think that's so important for our listeners, as well as viewers, I guess you could say. It's on both platforms too, but to be able, in a broader sense, doesn't have to be sales, but to push yourself. And if you're being like urged, like, in your heart that you really want to go for something, there's a reason for it. Step outside. And of course, if it's going to be for the greater good of society and everything else
Right.
that's positive, you're going to learn from it. You're going to, even if you fail, you're going to be able to meet people that you've never met before. But like you said, jumping outside of that comfort zone is going to make you grow personally, having that personal growth. But without that, and honestly, without somebody beside you, maybe kind of like nudging you, like, you could do this,
Right.
I think that's what really pushes the person to forward, to say, you know what, like, you become that voice in the back of their head, right? Like,
Yeah.
Michelle was telling me this. I know I could do it. And when they see success, that's when the train's really moving, right? That's where you're really
Absolutely.
gaining momentum.
Yes.
So thank you so much for sharing that. I got so much out of that. Like I said,
Good.
just, pushing yourself forward out of that comfort zone, the importance of mentorship. Do you mind just speaking on that, just for a little bit, about the importance? Maybe you had a mentor in your life, or now that you are a mentor, if you could just speak to mentorship in general and how important it
Sure.
is.
I have, so kind of like piggybacking off of that, I always learn, even if I'm mentoring or like, encouraging, I'm always listening for what someone's experience is, because I can learn from that. So I want to be like, I feel like it's a two-way street. But for me, I've always and often had relationships or friendships with people who were older than I am, whether that be a lot older than me or just a little bit older than me. And I'm I'm always looking for a takeaway. That sounds a little selfish, but a takeaway from someone of like, oh wow, I really like the way that they do this, or um
Yes.
I like that they are encouraging me. Look at the way that they respond to this, or they also, people that have lived life. There's something that just comes from life, and the aging process of, you've seen some things. Now there could be young people that have seen some things, if you will, as well. But
Sure.
I just have appreciated my opportunity to be around people and appreciate them, even in those times when I was younger, and to know, wow, there's something to be said about learning from someone that's ahead of me, Um,
Yeah.
so I don't know that I've had like specific mentors, but
Mhm.
I've also had a ton of mentors. It's like it's just people that I've learned from.
And I think what you just said there too about being able to or the willingness to always want to learn or to desire to learn. We could reach certain milestones in our life where we're like, okay, I think I got this, but at the end of the day, everything's always evolving, everything's always
Mhm.
changing. I mean, if we look at technology, I mean, technology seems like it changes on a daily basis for that
Right.
matter. And so being able to if you're in certain positions, if you do have the honor to be a mentor to somebody, but to be able to also learn and develop as a mentor
Right.
yourself too.
Yeah.
So I love that you said that. One thing I wanted to speak about was in this world, it seems like we are just constantly on the go, right? There's constant information being thrown at us. Our jobs sometimes could be a little bit overwhelming. But what is that one thing that you go to, if it's a hobby, if it's just finding your inner peace? What
Yeah.
is that one? I just want to go back, I guess, to hobby. But is
You
there anything that provides you that peace, that provides you that ability to maybe take a step back on a
Yeah.
weekend? You know what? I'm just going to put
Yeah.
work off to the side for a
Yeah.
second. And how do
For
you
sure.
find that inner peace?
It's so that's such a good question, and then it's also just such a great focus for us to have. I
Sure.
am a person of faith, and so I that is with me all the time. Um, Beyond that and sort of in tandem with that, I love being outside. I mean, I love it. I like to garden, and my backyard is just, I go and sit, and, or I walk around, or we have a pool and I'm in the pool. It's just, it's such a peaceful place for me to be. Maybe I'm just looking at what's growing, or maybe I'm pulling weeds, or maybe I'm just walking around like checking things out. Not There's not even anything that I'm doing necessarily, but it's meditative, if you will. And I'm a and I'll say, there's people that like a personality that is very high energy, like myself, like that. It sometimes doing, I'm still walking, or I'm still, but it's very slow for me. It's very intentional, and
Yep.
like being barefoot in the grass, like all of those things are practices that are beneficial for me. And whereas like some people may need to slow it all the way down to sitting, and I just think I want to be encouraging of that, for people to find what works for them and their personality, or the way that the outlook that they have. Because I think that whenever I think the idea of being reflective or contemplative is great, and people are, I would say most people are like, yes, I want to do that, and you don't know where to start. And so I would say just like loosen the reins, loosen the reins, and
Yes.
make sure that you are just, it's all about being just really kind, and slowing down your pace, and kind to yourself. So I don't know,
Yes.
that for me is such a big, it's such a place of peace for me.
Michelle, when you just said like just slow it down, that is something that is something ever since I just recently graduated from my PhD program, and I decided to just take a step back and to really um to reflect. But what you were saying, going on walks without
Hmm.
your, headphones in and listening to stuff constantly. Like I said, there's so much information that we could consume on a daily basis. But just taking it a step back, I do this most of the time. Like I'll go for just an afternoon, like night walk, and you're able to hear sometimes like birds chirping. And I know it sounds like, for some people it'd be like, I don't know if I could ever do this. But for me, I never thought I could actually do this, because I'm always like, no, okay, what's next? And like, what's next on the agenda? We did this, we're moving forward. What does that look like? Right. But being able to just take a second to say, wow, I'm just going to remove myself from it all, enjoy what this world has to offer us.
Yeah.
My husband Brian, it's so funny. recently I've taken to nature. I've always loved animals, always loved. We have 2 dogs, but a lot of the times, like where we live, there's deer in the back.
Yeah.
And I just took it upon myself one day. I'm like staring at them, and they're beautiful animals. And like, when
Yeah.
do we actually get to appreciate the world
Right.
out there? You
Right.
know,
Right.
and
Mm.
yeah, and just to even, it's so funny. I feed them now, and it makes me so happy, Michelle. Like, I never thought, like I said, I didn't grow up that way at all. But it is such a fulfilling sense for me, like in the morning when I do that. I feed the dogs, I go out and feed the
Yeah.
deer. But it's such a happy moment, and it's peaceful.
Oh,
Like I said,
yeah.
walking in the neighborhood, no earphones, no phone, but it really does center you. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for mentioning
I
that.
love
I
it.
am glad when you
Love
said
it.
slow, like slow down your life or slow living. I am resonating with that so much, to take a
Yeah.
step back. You
Yeah.
work hard, don't get me wrong, but you take
Right.
a step back and you realize the beauty of this world, that sometimes we're in such a
Yeah.
quick manner. It's like we got to
Yeah.
do what's next, what's next, but to take a
Yeah.
break.
Yeah. For sure. For
Thank you.
sure. And like, there's those memes that joke about like, never in my life did I think about birds, and then I turned 40 and now I'm like, what's this? Whatever. And I'm like, it's so true. And I think that I want to say that as an encouragement to try to like start with something like maybe look for a deer or listen for birds. And I mean, we're being funny about this, but like it's such a big deal. It's such a big deal. I will say, in my younger years, while I wasn't listening for the birds, I two times this happened when I have a lot of windshield time, obviously being in sales, and I've been in the car, but twice a bald eagle has literally flown in front of me. And it's like, what? It just
Wow.
stops you, even though it's just like an instant, but it's flown in front or just above or was sitting on the side of the road. It's incredible. So there's always things, if we just look for the places we may not actually be moving slow, because in both those instances I was driving, but it's a moment for connectedness.
Yes, yes. And as you mentioned this, finding peace, like I said, slower living, it makes you reflect back on so many maybe experiences you've had in life too. Could you maybe speak about or speak to a challenge that you had to overcome in life, and how you went about doing that? Was it a support system? Was it kind of just digesting it by yourself, being able to reflect upon a moment, how things can maybe change moving forward? What was that challenge like, and how did you, Michelle,
Yeah.
overcome that?
Yeah. Well, so I am still, I mean, sort of freshly out of um a time of professional just turnover. I mean, you and I've
Sure.
spoken about this. Um so I had, I mean, in like 2.5 to 3 years, I had 3 jobs, and also took a 4-month sabbatical because I was like, what is happening? So with that community, I actually want to go back and sort of edit what I was saying earlier about mentors, because I think that there's a better opportunity for mentorship when when you get a little bit of experience. That, at least that's how it was for me.
Yes.
So young people, maybe look for somebody just a little bit ahead of you. It could be just a little bit, or it could be like quite a bit ahead of you as far as age and or experience. But
Hmm.
in this time in my 30s, I felt like I had opportunities where I did develop mentors, or I did find
Yes.
people that were friends, but then I realized, you know what, they're actually mentors of mine. So all that to say, those were people that, whether they were friends and mentors, which
Mhm.
that tends to be the case for me, they were there for me, and
Sure.
they kept telling me who I was. Because while I joked earlier about my confidence, for the first time in my life, I thought, well, this is it. It was good while it lasted, and I'm making light of it, but it was
Um,
really, really profound. It was really profound to
sure.
me, because I don't. First of all, sales people in sales move around. There's nothing wrong with that. But
Sure.
I found myself in a situation where I was changing and I was interviewing people very extensively along with being interviewed myself. And I was very honest and that's who I am. But I kept
Yeah.
going back to like, do I need to not ask as many questions? Do I need to not say as much about what I'm looking for? And the answer is no. Because if they
Yeah.
don't recognize you for who you are and your value, then you don't need to be there anyway. And again, like the last place that I was at just last year, I was there for 7 months, which
Mhm.
it's easy to be embarrassed or to have shame about this or to think no one's going to want to hire me. Just keep fighting. That's all I can say is just keep fighting because it's not going to be the end of you. Even me with experience, an experienced career, mid career, if you will, or approaching mid career, I I I had a confidence, but it was really shaken. Um,
Sure.
so I don't know. It's finding people that know you and that can say, no, this is who you are. This is what you offer that, and
Yeah.
affirm that maybe someone's not seeing you for your full potential or your full self.
I absolutely love that. And I think that's going to help so many young women too, because in our lives, if we're talking specifically about career, for example, we see that there could be a lot of job changes. Like you said, if it's every 3, 4 years, learning something new, overcoming that, training, for each job. But almost in those times, maybe you lose a little bit, or like, I don't want to say lose confidence, but
Yeah.
you become a little
Yeah.
bit more hesitant because you're starting and stopping. But for those viewers out there and for those listeners, that we all go through those times where, like you were pointing out, Michelle, how your confidence could be shaken maybe a little
Yeah.
bit. And maybe at one point you were just like, this is the way it is, right? And then you
Right.
kind of take a step back, and if something happened to you in that job, or if they let you go, how you could still view it in a positive light. It takes time, of course. That first day, you're like, hold on, what just happened? What just
Right.
happened to me? Um,
Right.
but at the same time, being able to have that support system, and for those around you who really, really know you, to say,
Mhm.
no,
Right.
you're a beautiful person, you have a beautiful
Right.
personality, whatever the
Yeah.
situation is,
Yeah.
you're knowledgeable. This may be the sign that there's newer opportunity, that there's a better path ahead for you. And I
Yeah.
think that's critical, because in those moments, like I said, it's not easy to do. We're down on ourselves, like it was me, it was
Yeah.
all me. But no, maybe you're being redirected. Maybe you're
Right.
being redirected to better pastures. And in that moment, you have to always remember that. And that support system is what's going to be key to
For sure.
remind you in those maybe like lower moments, to make you build up again to that confidence
Yeah.
you once had.
Absolutely.
So I love that, Michelle. Support,
Yeah.
being able to bounce back even stronger,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I love that. Um, as we wrap up with this podcast, Plenty of Positivity podcast,
Love it.
we always love to end with two main things. Maybe a piece of advice for women in general. If you have a specific age you want to
Yeah.
target, that's up to you. A word of advice, and then last but certainly not least, a positive quote for our listeners to walk away with today.
Yeah. So, piece of advice for women. I, you know, whenever I was in my early 20s, I would say I don't know that I recognized the work. I knew that the women ahead of me had done work, obviously, like, rights and
Sure.
all the things, but I didn't understand. And I didn't definitely, it was almost like well, they've done it. Okay, it's done, if you will. Not that I thought like, equality is reached, if you will, but it was just, it was, I thought we were in a good place and we were. But the
Yeah.
goal is to leave everything better and for us to continue advancing, and everyone should continue to grow as individuals and as a culture, if you will, and community.
Yeah.
So I just can't, for the young listeners, I want to say, like, be aware or try to become aware of the of the things that weren't capable for the people that are 10, 20, 30 years over or more like older than you, but also keep looking ahead of how you want things to be different. Sometimes people have
Yeah.
insight and like are insightful to maybe in their young 20s they go absolutely not, this needs to be different. Change it, go after it, grab
Yeah.
it and run with it. You make a difference, and little by little, even if you feel like you're just doing it in your own circle, I think that
Yes.
that makes change and it creates a ripple effect. So I just want to say keep fighting for what, if you find yourself in a space that maybe doesn't welcome you, or maybe does welcome you but doesn't welcome someone else, if they welcome you, create space for somebody else to come along. And that's just, it just can be, um it really makes a difference, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It
I
makes a
love that.
difference, and it will make a
I
difference.
absolutely
Yeah.
yes. I love that. And what you were saying, I think maybe some of our listeners could be, maybe perhaps thinking, oh, well, I'm only one person, and how am I really going to make such a difference? But I
Mhm.
love how you positioned it to focus on, obviously, in other words, like you said, but focus on something small first.
Yeah.
And focus on maybe local community and how you can make a difference in that, and not looking at the big picture. How am I going to
Right.
change, the way people perceive this in this nation,
Right.
but thinking small, because I love that, Michelle, how you were talking about how it could be a ripple effect into other people's lives,
Yeah.
no matter what the topic is, no matter what the situation is for that matter, but knowing that you can in fact make a difference in a local community, in a person's life. So always to keep that in mind. So I love that piece of advice. And Michelle, as we wrap up,
Yeah.
please tell me some enlightening words that we could walk away with.
So my back to my dad again. This is just kind of funny that he's come
Yes.
up so often, but he is pivotal. Was pivotal in my making me
Hmm.
who I am. He would,
Sure.
make copies of this cartoon. It's like people have probably seen it. It's very rudimentary. It's a bird, like a pelican kind of bird, and there is a frog in the pelican's mouth, and the frog's like hands are completely clenched around the bird's neck. And it's just his legs hanging out. And so it says, never, ever quit. It's it's derived from the Winston Churchill quote about never quitting and, taking success, like seeing success and failure. And my dad talked me through that. He would mail it to me in cards, or he would show it to me and just give it to me in person. And he said, you see this bird, you see this frog, he is like hanging on for literally his life. If he ever lets go, he's lunch. And it's not, if he lets go in, this period of time, he won't be lunch. If he ever lets go, he's lunch. So you just can't quit. And so, I think I use those words to live by, and I hope it's helpful to someone else.
Those words are certainly so valuable, because I think today, we certainly could speak about this a lot in, like I said, in present day, but how we expect success overnight. We expect personal growth to happen overnight. But the truth of the matter is that it's going to take time. Your goals, the dreams that you wish to manifest into reality, it is not going to happen instantly. And we're in a society right now where everything is so instant. Like text messages are sent, emails are sent. We expect responses back so quickly. But to really take a step back and to realize that persistence, holding on, just like you said, tenacity, resilience, overcoming challenges when it's, like I said, it's sometimes it's not fun, right? You started something, it's all excitement, then it kind
Right.
of wears off, right? But being able to push through that and kind of go through those muddy waters, but you're learning and you're developing. It's not all a waste of time. You're developing with personal growth too during that time. So Thank you so much for sharing that with our audience.
Yeah,
Michelle, you have been absolutely wonderful. All
thank
the
you.
insight, all the wisdom and knowledge shared. I can't thank you enough for being on the Plenty of Positivity podcast.
It was a joy. Thank you so much for having me. It really was a lot of fun.